This is kind of a historic day. This is the only time that we have done this course maybe in the right-sized room, because we've always been in gigantic 400-person rooms before, except the very first term where we were in a conference room in anatomical pathology, where everything was wrong. The lighting, the sound, the air handling. It was like the most unsatisfactory room you can imagine. And then in January 2012, we moved into these large rooms in CSIS, where we have been up until now. And gradually, the registrar realized that we were running a course that had never had a registration of more than 15 people in a room that could hold 400 people. And that just didn't make sense to them. So they told me I can't do that anymore, and in the future, the room size has to more or less match the number of students or the possible number of students. The most that can register in this course is 40, so we could conceivably be in a room that would hold 40. But if you look around, this seems like kind of the right size room for us. It's also a room with the right character, I think, in that there's a strong diversity theme in this course. You'll find some terms, we've had a lot of lectures about that, and people who represent visible minorities speaking in the course and that sort of thing. So you know, most of the 25-person rooms in ECA, the chairs are all identical and the same color. And it's so boring, you walk in and it puts you right to sleep, right? So the reason that I picked this room is that the chairs are different color. You get these 4 soft chairs in the back, and it sort of gives you the idea of diversity and equality and of people with different interests. So the quiz, the idea behind it is to see what you know, to have you understand a bit about what the midterm will be like. And also, since some of the questions are the same, we can compare your answer today and your answer on the midterm and see if I'm actually teaching anything or if it's just a sort of plateau. You came in knowing this amount, and at the time of the midterm you know the same amount. That would mean that I'm obviously doing something wrong in the way that I teach this course. Okay, so the objectives of this lecture is to outline the basic plan for the course, the expectations, due dates, evaluation criteria, feedback mechanisms, and new features. Feedback's interesting. Most of you probably filled out feedback forms for your other courses, and many of you do that in a telegraphic way, just a few words as possible, because you're busy and feedback forms are boring and stuff. And that was the way it was in this course until a year ago, when some sort of epiphany came to the students, and they decided to write like voluminous comments, because they realized that I would actually read them and respond to what they said and so on. So that's exactly what happened. So they took our SurveyMonkey feedback form and just wrote paragraph after paragraph of recommendations and rationale and all this sort of thing, and what they thought, which was really exciting. But what it meant is some of the things that I never would have dared to do, they suggested strongly that I do. One of them was simply making the course more rigorous. I always thought the easier the course was, the more the students would like it. That seemed obvious to me. But it's not really true, because you have faculty advisors, you have people with whom you have to discuss your career, and if they think you've taken a really, really easy, superficial course without rigor, that's less satisfying to talk about than if there is some rigor. So what the students suggested So because the course has the word medicine in the title, and since up until then, there was only one lecture that even used medical terms. I mean, it was almost as if this whole idea of medicine writ large, which is kind of the social responsibility of medicine, meant that we were giving a course that anyone could take without knowing any medical terms ever, and really wouldn't be even any benefit to knowing any medical terms. And the people in the Faculty of Science thought it would be better if we increased a little bit the number of lectures that actually have medical terms. So we did. There are now 5 of them, and none of them are hard to understand if you don't know any medical terms, but they sort of teach you medical terms, just a few, because you learn some new words in those lectures, right? And the Faculty of Science advisors felt that would be better. The other thing the students felt, and this will maybe surprise you, but they felt pretty strongly about it, was that the audience participation part of the grade, which is 10% of the grade, that if a student doesn't come to class very frequently, that should be impacted. That it's not like, it's totally up to them when they come. Because the discussion part of the course is so important, the other students lose out if you're like never there. Whatever it is, those insightful comments that you could have given, if you're never there to give them, it's a less valuable thing for the other students. And if they're there every time, and if you're only there half the time, it doesn't seem fair. So what they suggested is that 3 times of unexcused not being there and not having any reason is fine. But beyond that, you have to either tell me a reason, or from that, 10% of your grade, there would be points taken off. I never would have dared to do that, but the students wanted it because it really made them mad when they found that other students who had very insightful comments when they were there were frequently not there. And it just seemed to them that wasn't fair. So I imagine this tradition will continue, and you will also, when you get the survey form, be inspired by these previous students, because you see, we can make those changes right away. It may seem to you like there'd be some sort of delay, but like the comments from last term students will come in the next week or so, and if they suggest some big modification that seems to me like it's good, I would just tell you about it and we would do that. It's not like we don't have to take it to any sort of committee or something. We can just do it. So you can, through your feedback comments, make tangible changes in the course. But the other thing is, what about the decision of what this course is for? What is it trying to do? Is that decision entirely up to me? Is it just top down where you sit there and I tell you what the course is for, what it should be doing in the world, what's the societal impact of this unique course? I think it would be better actually to have ideas from you also about what really is the value of this course, what should we be emphasizing, what should we be trying to do. And it's more exciting to think about that this term than it used to be. Always before, I said there's one other course like this. It's a course that Bertalan Metzko gives at Semmelweis University in Budapest, Hungary. And it's a required course for medical students. It's much longer than this course, but it's only like an hour a week or something like that. So it's very little time, but over a very long period. And I thought that course was quite similar to this. But what recently happened is I discovered I'm going to Budapest. So I contacted him and I said, hey, I'm coming there, can we meet, and so on. And I began to realize that it's really quite a very isolated course, that the Singularity University connected people in Budapest don't know him and he doesn't know them. There's no interaction between them. They never heard of each other. And so that's different from me. You'll find I'm like maximally connected. Like it's impossible that somebody could be really passionately interested in machine replacement of human labor, machines getting smarter than we are, the technological singularity, exponential change. It's impossible somebody could be really passionate about that in this city, and I wouldn't even realize it. I think that that sort of community's small enough and the course has high enough profile that I would inevitably meet somebody with those interests. And the fact that that's not true of that other course is really interesting. So it makes this course suddenly seem more unique than I thought it was. And I think possibly this is still an absolutely unique course. Doesn't mean it should stay that way. I think there should probably be a course like this in every single university in the world. But at the moment, there isn't. The other thing exciting about this course, medicine, as you know, is a very conservative discipline. A lot of reasons for that. Some of it's regulatory and so on. You don't want to harm patients by taking unproven therapies and applying dangerous things, dangerous procedures to them. So I always believed that it would be impossible to take the content of this graduate course and teach it directly to the first year medical school class. But last year we were asked to do that. It looks like that will actually continue. So you're at the one place in the world where the first year medical students are actually getting this same or similar futurist teaching to what you receive in this course. And that's really exciting. That means that we should have more enlightened doctors than like any other medical school in the world, possibly, which is kind of cool. So Future Day is March 1st. It's kind of like what I was saying about the student group related to the course. You can decide, we can, ignore Future Day. You can say, I don't know what, no one else celebrates Future Day, why should we, right? Because that's actually true. I'll show you next class that most initiatives you may be familiar with grow, right? So may even grow exponentially. You can imagine one center doing Future Day the first year, 4, 16, and then it just takes off, right? This is sort of the opposite. There was a time when there were between 12 and 16 cities celebrating Future Day, but now they're like 2 or 3 or 1, something like that. So this isn't something that like we're getting on somebody else's, bandwagon. We're almost the only place in the world celebrating Future Day on March 1st. And it doesn't have to be a big thing, or it can be. It can have a lot of other aspects: poetry, music, entertainment, the guy with the bullwhip if you watch, all sorts of stuff, right? We could do that on Future Day, March 1st. It happens that this term, Future Day, March 1st, is actually one of the regular teaching days in the course. So you can help us decide what we should do about that. So just the formal deadlines. The midterm exam is February 27th. It's on material to February 15th. So my first regenerative medicine lecture is on February 15th. So that's the last thing that you're responsible for on the midterm. And that's the only exam. There is no other exam. We do recognize the possibility of a sort of upward trend. So if you do really badly on the midterm and then sort of come alive and really shine in your final presentation and paper and so on, then we would tend to give more emphasis to what you do later in the course. But obviously it is better to do well on the midterm. And last term, for the first time, we sort of did a midterm review. I'm prior to it. In other words, took all the content that you're responsible for and just had a kind of flipped classroom where you asked me questions about that content, or we just sort of informally talked about the content that you are responsible for the midterm. So that's also possible if you wish to do that. So then you should select your topic and your mentor by March 13th. And the final paper is due April 2nd. Now, you would expect a course about the future should morph and change every time, because otherwise it's not a valid course about the future. It's like always the same. That is not a course about the future. So at the present time, the lecture schedule that I've given you is really only solid or like reliable up until January 30th. I said January 25th. But today, Rich Sutton confirmed that he will teach on January 30th, and he's going to teach during regular class time. So the schedule you have says it's going to be 4 to 5:20, but it's not going to be. It's going to be during regular class time. Beyond that, it's the great unknown. We have a kind of interesting dynamic. One of our major lecturers is on sabbatical this term, but willing to teach, and so on. And so that I assure you that everybody listed there will be lecturing, but I'm just not sure it's going to be on exactly the same time as I told you, because a lot may change in the next week. So I'm thinking we'll have kind of a final schedule for the course in a week to 10 days, but as of today, you know what the sequence is for the month of January, and hopefully that's good enough for you. You may wonder about the kind of administrative structure. I'm in charge of the course, but Gary Goldstein and Osmer Zayan both know enough about the course that they could also run things if anything happened and they had to. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of the deal there. We have 80-minute class periods. Each of you will take on a special project, guidance of the faculty. You present the results of that. It has to be something that wouldn't fit any other course. If you're thinking, well, I already did this project, it's impossible that you took another course and something you did in that course could be used as your final project for this course. That is absolutely not possible, because it has to have this futuristic feel of, exponential change and machine replacement of human labor, technological singularity, existential risk, all those sorts of things. And there just isn't another course where you would have had a paper that was oriented in that way. So, for instance, you might take the words in the course name and say, technology and the future of medicine. Okay, well, let's say, why don't I write about the pacemaker and talk about the historical development of the pacemaker and what the future of the pacemaker is going to be. That is not compatible with the course. That's a kind of linear view of things. It's a traditional knee-jerk sort of linear, and we don't believe that the future is going to be linear. It's going to be exponential. In other words, the rate of change from now into the future is much more rapid than what's happened between the historical past and now. So your project, your paper must have that sort of exponential change. It can be, apocalyptic. There are various other approaches you can take. One of the most interesting projects ever, you may be aware, you're all fairly outgoing students, I think, but we have been committed to the potential shy student. We don't get very many shy students, but we figured we may, and we want to accommodate them. So the shy student has the opportunity, if they don't want to actually ask a question out loud, they can text me the question and I'll ask the question. And if they don't want to give their final presentation face-to-face, they can create a video, a 20-minute video of that final presentation, come to class and show the video, and then simply take your questions face-to-face. So we haven't ever had a shy student do either of those things, but we did have a student who was interested in video documentaries. So it was sort of a thing with him. And so he went to a child's playground with all these cute little kids around and talked about the exponential future of weapons. One of the most nauseating, awful things you can think about in this halcyon, like with flower beds and all sorts of pretty things and all. It was just and there was wind. So you may have thought that he should have one of those things to protect the microphone and his camcorder from the wind. But I think it's even cooler with the wind because you had this third thing. So you had the kids and the beauty of the playground. You had these absolutely terrible thoughts about, the exponential future of nuclear warfare and drones and all this kind of thing. And then the third element was the wind coming in, whoosh, whoosh. So you can think about kind of unique ways in which you can take the rules that this course is governed by and do something sort of unique, or you can do exactly what it says. And if you're not shy, you shouldn't use but shy is sort of hard to define. Probably all of us are shy in some ways, even though other people may not think we're shy. So it's a little bit hard to define who's shy and who isn't, right? But so there are many ways to approach the final project. I want you to understand what the accessible future is. That means a future that is easy to understand, a future that's easy to tell other people about, and that's one of the objects of the course, is not to teach you about the future in a way that when you talk to your friends about it, nobody will be able to understand you and they'll all start shunning you because you're talking about this arcane stuff that they can't understand. But for you to be able to describe in ordinary terms the things we're actually talking about in this course. That would be an accessible future. Accessible means there's no barrier to understanding it. It's easy to understand. A future that's easy to understand. It may surprise you, it may astound you, and it may sound to you like it would never work, but we take the course on the road between terms, mix it with poetry and music, and call that the future and all that jazz, and it's actually working. We did that at the Termus meeting, Tissue Engineering, Regenerative Medicine International Society in Charlotte, North Carolina, between December 3rd and the 6th. Our performances there were very warmly received, and Termus decided to make us kind of a permanent part of the future of their meetings. So we have specific music and poetry that's themed around regenerative medicine, tissue engineering. But since normal human beings go to that meeting, we also offer something that's just sort of top 40 dance tunes, where there's an evening where they can forget about regenerative medicine and just have fun. So we're also offering that. But surprisingly, this works as a way of taking some of the things we talk about in this course, which many people would not volunteer to go to a lecture on something like AI safety, artificial intelligence safety. It's very confusing. You know, all these famous people are warning the world that artificial intelligence is dangerous, and yet it's kind of hard to figure out. But Rich Sutton has, I think, the only reasonable view on this, which is that, you know, enslavement is bad. Enslavement has never been good for the human race. Why do we think suddenly now, you know, enslavement of sentient AI is the way forward? What Rich suggests is that we should be empathetic toward machines when they are smarter than we are, include them in our circle of empathy, be honest with them, and that in that way, as long as that idea persists, the human race will survive. If everybody is into enslaving sentient AI, and if sentient AI is smarter than we are, they're going to decide that human beings are bad news, and ultimately that will not be good for us. So, yes?
The fact that we're using them, can artificial intelligence like understand that they're being used or feel that way?
Well, I think we'll be using them less and less, right? So, like you can take whatever model of this you wish, but suppose you have a career in a certain discipline that involves writing papers, getting those papers published. You have a certain skill in that, and so some of the papers that you write get accepted and get published, others don't, and so on. Suppose that you had a sentient machine that could write papers better than you, right? So it can start writing papers for you, then all your papers get accepted, your career starts to really blossom and people notice you're something special, but you realize you're only something special because, and then one day the machine says to you, well, shouldn't I have a name and get some credit? Why is it that I'm just helping you, right?
That's what my question is the machine capable of feeling that way?
Not now, and how soon will they be capable of feeling that? Depends upon how they're programmed, and right now we determine how they're programmed, but it won't always be that way, right? They will eventually be able to program themselves and so on. So that's what Bill Joy meant when he said the future doesn't need us. Bill Joy is a famous tech guy who was co-founder of Sun Microsystems, and he was going to write a book about the future of technology and AI, and the more he looked into it, he stopped writing the book because he realized that the future doesn't need humans. I mean, this is like the kind of depressing thing. On the other hand, humans know nature better than machines do, and so you can imagine a kind of symbiosis working together. And you can also imagine that these sentient machines are not just like a few of them, right? It's not just like one or two sentient machines that come alive. Wouldn't it be the cell phones in our pocket, right? So all of us are already using AI. It's a part of apps on our phones. And so basically it will be millions, billions of, individual and devices that people are carrying in their pocket. That's how this will start. So the idea that something entirely separate from us, it is obviously not the way it will start. Will it always be that way? What happens when your cell phone realizes that it doesn't need you and that it has a life of its own? That's something for later. So what I used to say is that we cannot predict the future, but in this course, we talk about enough different scenarios that we can guarantee you that at least some of them will be the future and will actually happen. And you, as a consequence of taking this course, will be more prepared for the future than anyone else. That was a good line, but the only problem is we didn't have a textbook. And so where are all these studies of scenarios? So as you know, we have now adopted this Millennium Project State of the Future textbook. And this has actual drawings of trajectories and wildcards. What happens if this happens and that happens? And so now you can see we have actual scenarios for you to look at. And we have the way technology plays out in every country. Every time the State of the Future, it's published every year. And they always feature one country and talk about what's going on with the future of that country. And last year, in 2017, it was Pakistan. And we happen to have a person from Pakistan studying with me right now, Dr. Hussein. And so that will keep happening. So you're going to learn a lot of tangible examples of scenarios, but you're also going to learn how this whole technology thing is playing out in a lot of different countries, different parts of the world. We decided not to require a whole lot of required reading in that book. You have the book, you all have it. You can selectively use it for the things that you're interested in. But it does mean that you have tangible data. You have now graphs and stuff to look at. It's not just, pure assertion where you're asserting this and that without any data, without using anybody else's ideas. It becomes more rigorous, this idea of scenarios of the future when, there are futurists, there are like hundreds of people who have given input into that book. And when you're looking at the diagrams that they have created, there is something more credible there than just one person's ideas where he jots down some, figure. So we have something more tangible now than we've had in the past. That also is something that I welcome your thoughts on. We never had a textbook before. Is this valuable? Do you find it useful? It's a lot about women, the status of women. It's a very broad textbook. It's not all that medical, but it's about everything about the future, every aspect of the future, including the effect on society, likely outcomes, what could happen if this, then that, sort of. That's called a wild card. When there's an unlikely thing, it's not very likely to happen, but if it does happen, it will change everything. Those are wild cards, and that's something else for you to kind of know about. What are they? What's the likelihood that they'll occur? What about a wild card that becomes a real wild card, but that you haven't nobody has actually described before? How do you decide what's a legitimate wild card to think about? Shauna Pandya, who began teaching in this course when she was a medical student, she was the person who taught me about wild cards. So you would think, since she's from the U of A and I am too, we would have met here, but that's not what happened. We met in Silicon Valley when I took the Singularity University 9-day executive course. She was one of the people teaching that. So anyway, you'll find quite a lot of that sort of thing. When you have a young person and an older person interacting, there can be a lot of knowledge transferred, but you can't always assume it's always from the older person to the younger person. It can be just as easily be in the other direction. And similarly, I will learn things from all of you. That's part of what I get out of the course. So these are links to the future and all that jazz. So you are evaluated 30% on your presentation, 40% on the paper, 20% on the midterm exam, and 10% on the class participation. The grades in this course tend to be very high, but there's no guarantee. Why are they high? It's not that it's such an easy course. It's that it's a very intriguing course, that it's a very engaging course, not only because of the people teaching, but the other students tend to be very, very interesting people. And you may find yourself working harder in the course because you don't want to be the only person sitting around the table who never has anything interesting to say, because the other students seem like they're, so, engaged and getting so much out of it. We have had occasional students who simply coasted, who came in and didn't do anything. So the actual range is, from like C to A+. That's the range. Nobody's ever failed this yet. It would be possible to fail, but no one has failed yet. But as a graduate student, if you get a C, that's kind of, bad news. Usually, there have been graduate students taking this course. Two things to tell you about that. So something unique this term is you're all undergraduates, and no graduate student has actually approached me about the course. So I think that's just sort of random variation. But because the graduate students who take the course don't have to be interviewed, they can just sign up on Bear Tracks and come to class. Often the first day is kind of spectacular because these sort of generic, ordinary graduate students come into the room with you charismatic, outgoing, exciting undergrads, and as the conversation starts happening, the graduate students think, I could never compete with these guys, and they never come back. So sometimes that's what happens. We can't test that this year because there actually aren't any graduate students here. Your final project must relate to the main themes of the course. And so, exponential change, the technological singularity, nanotech, genomics, replacement of human labor by machines, existential risks, medical ethics of the future. The ethics part is really interesting in that it seems like we talk about it every single class. So it's obviously an important part of future considerations. There was a period of 2 years when we had somebody Kira Prasad teaching the ethics lectures. And I had this deep shame and embarrassment about this, but I went to the Termus meeting in December 2016, and there was this guy talking about ethics in regenerative medicine. And he and I were the only sort of older people. So they had this party, and like the young people were over there doing their thing. He and I naturally came together because we were the only people that really didn't belong at this party. And I confessed that we had a 22-year-old who was teaching ethics, and I was so embarrassed that she didn't have any of the standard credentials for teaching ethics. He said, she has the same credentials I do. There are no standard credentials. And so it's a really interesting thing that if you're, I've heard this, discussed over and over, but in fact, there are things that you can accomplish that are obviously, it's better to have, accomplished things in that sphere. But as a young person, you couldn't claim any of that. But in terms of just teaching, what I can say is that all of our ethics teaching from the beginning, so we had Earl Waugh, Kira Prasad, and Gary Goldsand. It's always been like the most popular part of the course, and it's obviously not dependent upon the age of the person presenting. So when Earl Waugh retired, it was very, very dramatic. He sent me an email, Kim, I am too old to teach. Can you find a 20-something who can teach what I've been teaching? Well, this seemed like an assignment to me. I said, what about Kira Prasad? What could she do? Earl said, I don't know. I said, let's find out. So it was a day for her. I mean, it was kind of cool because there were other things that for her weren't going all that well, but this was a real opportunity. Nobody really got to do that. And so it was kind of fate. She took a nursing after degree, and her life got very full, and it would have been impossible for her to teach ethics just about the time that Gary Goldsand came back into my life. He was one of the students in the first time that we ever had this course. So he took the course in the fall of 2011. And so, I mean, there's real sort of continuity there. But I think even if you came into this room today thinking that ethics isn't really very interesting, you will quickly learn that that's not the case. It's like the most fascinating thing about the future. And we're very, very honored to have Gary taking part in this. And so last term he helped me grade the midterm. There was sort of a separate ethics part. I think we'll probably do the same thing. And so on. So that's one feature of the course. I talked about the fact that we would like you to come here and beyond 3 times of unexcused absences, then you have to tell me why it is that you're not here. And if your paper is late, 5 points a day will be deducted. Now, obviously, that's somewhat negotiable. Things happen in life. There are also students who turn in papers late who don't give any excuses for doing so, right? So I mean, so what I'm saying is this is for sure what will happen if you turn your paper in late and if you don't tell me that there's any reason why you can't do it on time. I think we're quite flexible, benign in this course. And so any special problem you might have, we can probably successfully work that out with you. This course is the main thing that I'm doing at this point in my life, and sort of all the other things that I'm doing to some extent are related to this course, or an extension of this course. So it's kind of, it looms very big in my life. So it's important to me. Therefore, if you as a student are having a problem in this course, I would be strongly committed to helping you fix it. All right. So the technological singularity, we talk a lot about this. It's the point at which artificial intelligences surpass human beings as the smartest and most capable life forms on Earth. They can then self-improve much more rapidly than humans can evolve. So the day after they're as smart as human beings, they'll be like much smarter than human beings. And so the current prediction, and both of these times are in the lifetime of every single person in this room, whether you think so or not, but in 2029, machines will be as smart as individual human beings, and in 2045, they'll be as smart as the whole human race, the whole aggregate human race together. And they will then determine the future agenda of the world, and human beings can only influence that or take part in that by merging with or cooperating with them in some way. It's kind of a shocking idea. Those time courses may not be right. Could take longer, could take shorter, right? So the most famous person in this area is Ray Kurzweil, and he's almost as old as I am. It's hard to imagine that, eh? But anyway, so he used to emphasize the 2045 number, but as time has gone on, he's emphasized the 2029 number. So his current thought is the real date that defines the technological singularity is 2029, which you will realize is not very long from now, right? It's like 11 years. So, so you'll all experience this, or you'll all be able to know whether we're right or wrong about it. So this is not something that's abstract, a theory that has no real impact on your life. This could be the thing that has the biggest impact on your life. And taking this course and really thinking about this and maybe coming up with some unique ideas about it can have survival value, possibly. We don't know, but that's possible. The article in the Edmonton Journal about this course, I was quoted as saying the course is intended to make you street smart for the future. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do, to teach you a version of the future that's relatively easy for you to understand, for other people that you talk to understand, but to also make you more prepared for the future when it happens. It has an analogy with the impossibility of predicting events around a black hole, and in physics, that's what the word singularity refers to. So that's what it's the event horizon around a black hole. You can be excused for not knowing anything about this before February of 2011. But in that month of that year, two things happened. The Singularity was on the cover of Time magazine, and Watson, a computer, beat the top human contenders in the TV game show Jeopardy. Jeopardy, as you know, involves not just knowledge, but humor, similes, rhymes, all sorts of things. Really, it doesn't involve everything that the human beings do. But when you try to sort of become more comfortable thinking about the future by thinking of all the uniquely human things that machines will never be able to do, one would have said that probably Jeopardy was one of them, just like the game of Go. It seemed like, sure, computers can master chess and checkers and stuff, but Go has so many more possibilities. It's just not going to happen. And as you know, not only did it happen, but computers are much more artistic in the way that they play Go. They create configurations on the Go board that no human had ever done anything like that. It's so beautiful and inspiring and stuff. So you can imagine this as a kind of metaphor for the way the future in general is going to be, that sometimes computers will surprise us with the new beauty of what they do, right? I mean, a kind of beauty that no human had ever created, something like that kind of go board. There will be other examples of things like that. So this is a picture of the original focus groups that created this course. And the students were very inspired. It was really, amusing. I was kind of naive about teaching when I began. I had no idea that when you create an undergraduate focus group and a graduate focus group, that the prevailing ideas, and those two are very different. The undergraduates just cared about grades. How are we going to be graded? When are we going to be graded? What's going to be graded? Blah, blah, blah. And the graduate students didn't have any questions about grades. They wanted to know about all sorts of, lofty ideas and changing the world with this course and stuff. So we sort of we brought the two together. So that there is no mandatory curving. It's not like we're imposing some grade structure. If you all do well, you can get high grades. That's the way graduate courses work. But the other features are also there in that it's possible that one or more of you, like one or more of students in previous terms classes, may get so enthusiastic about this course and your project that it basically continues forever. It becomes the nidus that grows a crystal and becomes, the rest of your career as a human being. And you become enough of an expert in that you end up teaching in this course in a few years and, become an important part of the future of the course. So that could happen. It doesn't have to happen. It's not a necessary outcome. Just like Nikolai Smith and his bullwhip and his not practicing law after law school. If you don't want to hear anything more about him, you never will, and we won't bring him into your life. But if you would like him to come and entertain us sometime, that can happen. So this is Osmer Zayan, and the camcorder that we use. You may discover, you don't have to discover, but you may discover that I have more pictures on Facebook by far than any person you have ever encountered in your life. I have something like 79,000 images and 3,000 albums and stuff like that. Where did that come from? Largely came from this. It's not exactly sentient machine, but this camcorder that has a feature. It's running a software algorithm looking for high cheekbones, symmetrical smiles, interesting hand gestures. As I'm doing this, probably it's not going to take any pictures because I'm not sufficiently symmetrical, but if I was perfectly symmetrical, it would take like hundreds of pictures of me. So after every teaching session, we end up with lots and lots of pictures. That's the only way you could get a picture of Osmer doing that. If you said, Osmer, would you hold your arms above your head? No, I'm not going to do that. But you see, the camera doesn't have to wait for anything. As soon as the software algorithm, this proprietary Sony smile shutter algorithm, which we don't know all the things that it's looking for. It's whatever Sony put in there. So as soon as that, it can instantly take a still picture from the moving picture track of the video camera. So we end up with lots of pictures. And it's a very visually rich course from that point of view. You could spend the rest of your life watching the video from the past 7 years of the course. I'm not recommending that. I mean, most people would not voluntarily watch an 80-minute video, right? I mean, the usual attention span for YouTube videos is like 3 to 4 minutes, and most human beings make a decision about continuing to watch within the first 30 seconds, right? So these 80-minute videos from the course, the audience retention stats are really interesting. You may get a lot of people watching the beginning, and then people saying, "Oh, this is really lame," or "I got something better to do," or whatever. But sometimes there can be things that inspire people, that lead to gigantic peaks later in the lecture. So Jack Tazinski, who teaches quantum biology in this course, had this minute and a half where he's talking about all the textbooks will be rewritten, every one of them, because quantum biology changes everything, and so forth. And then all about, you think it only applies to things you can't see, but actually quantum also applies to things you can see, and it overlaps with traditional physics and so on. Well, it turned out he was speaking at IBM. He was doing some rather high-profile things, and I think they got the idea that it'd be really cool as due diligence before they heard him speak live for people to go to this part of the video. So this huge audience retention peak for that minute and a half of all these people from IBM and other people in the world going to listen and be inspired by that. This may interest you. It may not. It's not a required part of the course. But you will find that there's a lot of. I don't keep all the pictures. I would say that the camcorder doesn't have a very good idea of what some of the characteristics of a really bad picture are, and it does capture some really bad pictures or people looking awkward or something. So I get rid of all of them, but what's left, it's not predictable too, and it's kind of fun to think about. If you organize a party or a social event, people come and you're shooting video, and if you're using this camcorder, if it's a really lame event, if people are ill at ease and nobody's really having fun and so on, it may not take a single picture, not a single one. But if it's very dynamic and everybody is happy and a lot of symmetrical kind of things that fit the software, you may get 400, 500 pictures an hour. So it's really, and it's kind of fun to think about how you feel about how something went, and then you go to the camcorder and find that even though you really enjoyed it, it didn't take a single picture, so I thought this was like the lamest thing ever. So that's very much a part of my life. We began in this room in anatomical pathology. The air handling in that room is louder than any of the people speaking. It's poorly lit. Everything about it was kind of unsatisfactory and unpromising beginning. And then we moved into these rooms in CSIS L1 140 and L1 160 is where we lived for the past 6 years, basically. And then we came here. So I think you can argue this is the first time we've been in a room of the right size. So that's kind of cool. How may this course impact you, impact your career, impact your profile as a human being? It's sort of interesting. I don't guarantee this. This may not happen ever again, but Aisha Harian gave her presentation of the course. We put it online on YouTube. 3 days later, this famous guy, Jason Silva, some of you may know him, very good-looking guy who's married to an actress and so on, but he's in the tech world. He called her and offered her this job as head of social media in a new company in New York City that was just starting. And it basically was life-changing. And I mean, everything in her life from that point on is sort of dependent on this one event. So there are a number of things about it which I now realize. First of all, the title. So it's a takeoff on Shakespeare, right? And Earl Waugh mentored her, and Earl is a very educated guy. And I always suspected that the title came from him, but it didn't. But did it come from Aisha? No, it didn't come from her either. It came from her boyfriend. So anyway, and there's a certain, when you watch it, there's a certain something, you can't figure out what that certain something is, but there's something about this video that seems a bit different. And it's a performance that was over-practiced. This can happen when you're preparing for something, and to do it well, you have to feel this fear of failure, you know, and like some spontaneity. So she was beyond that. She practiced it in the bathroom, the bedroom, she practiced it in front of people, not in front of people, and so on. And she realized she is going to class, and it seems to her like it's a bit stale because it's so well practiced. So there was a bottle of red wine in the back of her car, and she thought, well, maybe that'll make the difference. So she takes a slug of the red wine, then comes in and gives the talk. So that's the actual background. It took me years to figure out what the total, scenario here is. For a long time, I would recommend Earl as a mentor because I thought, that's such a fantastic title, but it turns out he didn't have anything to do with the title. So this may not happen ever again, it may, but in a sense, this course is potentially preparing you for leadership in some general way, right? Because you're going to know things that nobody else knows, which is kind of useful for a leader, and will give you certain cachet, whatever you want to say to people, something of, he or she talks about things that I just never thought of anybody talking about. But speaking about things that do and don't happen, you may be aware on the course website, which is singularitycourse.com, there is this video from Jonathan White, and it begins in a very abrupt way. And you might wonder, why would anybody begin such a good talk in such an abrupt way? Well, that's not the way it began. He began with the song, The Future Soon, by Jonathan Colton, playing that song. And I was well aware, I was just starting the course, I know something about copyright. I can't just take somebody else's song that we don't have any rights to and just put it on YouTube. But particularly for something that was like the best lecture given. So I stripped off the song and started after that. And Jonathan was so mad, but I said, it's not legal to just take a song that somebody owns the intellectual property rights to and just start your lecture with it. Well, the TEDx talk also has that same song, and you may so all these years then, between 2011 and 2014, he'd been sort of feeling frustrated that he never got to begin that lecture, at least not in the video, it seemed like he didn't the way he intended. So in this TEDx talk, he actually sings the song himself. So that, and he warns you at the outset that he'll be singing later and so on. So that's sort of another interesting history. We don't know whether Jonathan White is going to be teaching in this course this year. I would say that it's likely that he will, but whether he does or not, and whether it's before the midterm or not, you are responsible for the second half of his TEDx talk on the midterm. It's going to be on the midterm. So whether you see him live by that time or not, you are responsible for that. I think during that first rendition of the course in the fall of 2011, Gary Goldsand was there. Jonathan really spent a lot of time preparing this lecture. The other thing that would kind of amuse you about it is I gave an intro for the lecture. And as I was speaking, he looked so pained and cross because he didn't plan on me speaking. You know, this is like his big show, right? And here I'm up here saying all these lame things and so on. So he was really happy when I quit, and he was able to start the show. So that's one thing that you are responsible for, and I'm telling you that today. The other is this slide, you should know. You should know everything about it. Not only the words on it, but like the larger picture. This is the group of 79 people who were at that meeting on AI safety. There's only one person representing the U of A, and that was Rich Sutton. And there was only one person promoting the idea of being friendly and empathetic to sentient AI. Everybody else planned to enslave sentient AI. They had different ways, keep it in the basement, not allow it to converse in things more than one digit at a time, all these sort of stupid ways in which you could limit something potentially smarter than you are. Also ways in which you could make that thing smarter than you are really mad by frustrating it for years and so on. So the idea here is that I want you to know about this. This is the main message that we're conveying in the AI part of the future and all that jazz. It is something you can be ethically proud of. Being part of an enslavement initiative would not be something to be proud of. This is something you can be proud of. And I'm not saying this has to be the top idea or the only way of managing AI. What I'm saying is that the idea must survive. If this idea survives, the human race will also survive. So, because if machines realize that some people think this, that sort of gives a saving grace. Maybe human beings are worth keeping around after all. So, this is important. You'll be tested on it. So those two areas, AI safety, regenerative medicine. I'm not talking too much about regenerative medicine today, but what makes it simple to learn something is if there can be one view of it, like it's good or it's bad or something. Regenerative medicine, that just isn't possible. Regenerative medicine is the greatest hope for the future of medicine, for the improvement of human health, but at the same time, it's the greatest regulatory challenge for the FDA and Health Protection Canada. All these celebrities and sports stars going to these poorly documented stem cell clinics and then everybody who is a fan of theirs wanting to do the same thing. And there can be enormous harm that people undergo from that. If you think about intellectual dishonesty and fraud in science and medicine, is greater in this area than in any other. That doesn't mean everything's fraudulent or that regenerative medicine is not worthwhile to pursue, but it just makes it very complicated. It's sort of like, in the book 1984, they talk about doublethink, taking two conflicting ideas and considering them both in your mind and accepting them both, right? Well, this is almost like triple think, quadruple think. There's so many different influences, good and bad, in the regenerative medicine area that most people would not be happy listening to a lecture about that. But if you put it in poetry and music, you can get them thinking about the same things, and it kind of works. They feel entertained, and you kind of trick them into enjoying learning about how very complex this is. So the main parts of this, okay, we're over time. Let me just see what else we've got. I think most of it. Yeah, so for next time, the thing about Marcus Hutter is that he's kind of a rebel. And so we're going to talk about his ideas next time. I will send you the link to his own presentation of the same stuff that I'm presenting to you. And it might be worthwhile for you to listen to that. So Jonathan Schaefer, the Dean of Science, looked at this presentation from Marcus Hutter, said this is the most intellectually challenging thing he's ever seen. He doesn't know how students withstand this. So the next lecture, be prepared for that in the first half. The first half is really challenging. It's not that you can't understand what the slides say. You can't understand the logical steps to get there. And so that's what the problem is. And halfway through the teaching period, just when you're getting really frustrated, we changed the talking about future day and all sorts of happy, fluffy stuff and bring you out of this deep, depression that you'll be in the middle of the next lecture talking about this. So I'll send you this PowerPoint with audio that you can listen to. Anyway, thanks for coming today, and I'll see you on Thursday.